Feeling smug, are we? All right. Those of you who said Spencer's the kidnapper, pat yourselves on the back and let's get on with the podcast. It's a perfectly plausible podcasting platform to pick apart a deliciously dangerous and delightful Dexter, the big bad body problem here on Dissecting Dexter. I'm Gareth, coming to you from the mobile studio today in the heart of Yorkshire, England, making a vague attempt at alliteration, but despite my poor efforts with the English language, we are most definitely here to talk about the latest episode of Dexter Original Sin. We're 7 episodes in with this one, only 3 left, and I'm sure you'll agree that they ratcheted things up a notch this week. We'll get into it very shortly, but it's interesting to see that this is the series' highest rated episode so far, according to the scores on IMDb. I can't honestly say it's my favourite episode of the series so far, but it was certainly a good one. Elsewhere in the Dexterverse, production continues on Dexter Resurrection. A big-name guest star has been announced. Uma Thurman has joined the cast. I don't think we know yet who she'll be playing, whether she'll be love interest maybe, or I don't know. Scott Reynolds has hinted at another big name coming soon. I was going to do a Shortcuts podcast for Patreons during the short hiatus last week, but I'm sorry, life got busy and I couldn't make it happen. Apologies for that. I'll try and talk to you on there soon though. Anyone who wants to join the Patreon page and help support the podcast can visit patreon.com/dissectingdexter. I, of course, do the podcast for free, but there are some costs, primarily hosting, and the Patreon supporters help me cover that, and my thanks go to each and every one of you. I love you dearly. Okay. Let's get on with this, shall we? It's Dexter Chat that you're here for, and that's what you're going to get. Here we go. Dexter Original Sin, Episode 7, The Big Bad Body Problem. Original air date January 24th, 2025. Written by Katrina Mathewson and Tanner Bean, and directed by Monica Raymond. We left Dexter in a potentially sticky situation. The slightly incriminating corpse of Levi Reed in the back of his truck, and finding the sheriff's department at the dump site. He thinks fast though. Clever Dexter, he always does, doesn't he? And makes out that he's there with forensics. Although I was half expecting someone to wonder why he was there on the basis that no one had specifically called him out. Anyway, he wades in confidently, and of course, as we knew, it was the uneaten arm of Handsome Tony that's bubbled up from the swamp. It was pretty funny how Dexter dealt with it, though, pretending an alligator came for him and took the arm. So many officers at the scene, though, you'd think someone would have seen. Short of killing every gator in the swamp and searching stomach contents, there's nothing they can do. Dexter, though, still has work to do, and sticks Reed in a dumpster. Seems like a desperate thing to do. Bodies in dumpsters are a staple of movies and TV shows, and they have a habit of being discovered, and he did this in broad daylight too, but the impression I get is that this one will stay unfound. However, it seems like Dexter bloody stinks after this, and Deb's nose is seriously offended when he gets home. There's a funny line about what swamp smells like a hobo's asshole. That made me smile. There's a through line this episode with pager codes, or beeper codes they call them. I remember pagers from the 90s, the days before we all had mobile phones, but I don't remember codes. I never had one like that. I would like to know what Masuka sent to Sophia later on though. But Sophia's wondering what's happened to Dexter, and Deb makes a fair point that he shouldn't leave her hanging after she's just got on her knees for his pleasure. We learn that Deb's hoping to go to college, and she's up for a scholarship, thanks to her performance with the volleyball team. Sounds like a scholarship is her only hope of getting into college, so there's a lot riding on it. Dexter tells Harry about the big bad body problem, and poor Harry, I keep thinking about his ticker. How much more stress can his heart take? There's definitely a funny side to Dexter having a fucking dead body in his truck while surrounded by officers of the law, all blissfully ignorant of what's right under their noses. Sophia races up in her car as Dexter pulls out of the driveway and she finds a condom wrapper in his truck. It's a classic TV show misunderstanding, but she doesn't know Dexter's not cheating on her. And he can't tell her the whole truth, so it looks like this one-sided fledgling relationship might be over already. Deb doesn't really help later with Sophia when she's sticking up for Dex, but pretty much admits she told him to go out with her. In fairness, Sophia's upset and Deb's really flippant about it. I mean, she knows there's no way Dexter's cheating. And I love her explanation for the condom. Oh, he was probably making balloon animals. I mean, that's brilliant. I love that. But Sophia doesn't. And maybe that's the end of another relationship. Actually, rewatching the scene, Deb's pretty clumsy, misjudging her jokes, tactless with her admitting pushing Dexter to go out with Sophia. It reminded me of how socially clumsy Dexter can be. But we don't really expect it from Deb. I mean, she can be impulsive, but not like this. Anyway, it sets up Deb overreacting later and punching that girl in the face, costing her the scholarship. Maybe this paves the way for her to be going to police training or something. To be fair, the girl had every right to be pissed off. Deb and Gio did take her car and dump it on the beach, but it was Sophia who snitched in revenge. I thought this was a really low move by Sophia. The fallout over Dexter is one thing, but stealing the car is a felony and could get Deb in serious trouble with the law. Snitching about this has far greater possible consequences. I guess this is typical, though, with teenagers, how things can escalate in school and get out of hand, and Sophia won't have thought about it beyond just doing something back to get to Deb.
This is the Dissecting Dexter Podcast.
It helps me control the chaos.
We see Nicky Spencer in his cell, and he shows some MacGyver-like skills, getting hold of some wire from the shit bucket and sharpening it. He's showing some guts. I just hope we don't eventually get to see them for real. This whole thing with Nicky takes on a really horrible new vibe, knowing it's his dad doing it to him. Rewatching the scene when he takes the finger, I mean, what the fuck is this guy on, doing that to his child? How could anyone do that to any child, never mind their own? It's completely screwed up, and I'm hoping they do a good job of explaining what his deal is. Back in Miami Metro, the pressure is on. The clock's ticking and they know the time is right for a finger to come through the mail. They still think there's a cartel connection. Attention turns to their unidentified arm, and I loved all heads turning towards Dexter.
So where are we at with the arm that was found at Alligator Alley, the John Doe?
Nowhere. We weren't able to get any fingerprints before the evidence was eaten.
My bad. That is a hell of a way to lose evidence.
From zero to hero, though, at least in Dexter's head. His serial killer theory is validated by LaGuerta and Harry going to Spencer about their NHI murders. She lays it all out, repeating things Dexter said last episode. Spencer agrees to them linking the murders and pursuing it as the same killer. Harry's really supportive here, as a good partner should be. It scores him a few brownie points in a season where we've been pretty critical of him. Clark approaches Dexter about their bumping into each other in town the other night. Clark's understandably worried about being outed at work, but of course Dexter's not in the least bit bothered. We didn't think he would be. Sexuality is so far off his radar. He agrees to keep Clark's secret, though, and my wife wondered if Clark will end up returning the favour for Dexter. Perhaps he'll catch Dexter somewhere he shouldn't be and agree to keep it hush-hush, maybe in a situation where Dexter's doing something he shouldn't. stalking someone, or maybe they're further featuring Clark trusting Dexter, setting him up to be a victim of the NHI killer later on. What is clear from the scene is the message Dexter gets, that Clark can be himself in Miami but keeps his job separate so he doesn't have to choose between them. Same thing Dexter ends up doing.
Dad, these feelings I have, I can't ignore them. You taught me the code to help me channel my urges. What's the point if I can't even use it?
Killing a person, it's not that simple. Once you do it, it can't be undone.
You're listening to Dissecting Dexter.
In flashbacks, we spend some more time with Laura this week. Seems like Harry's finally stepped back and ended the affair, although things are pretty cool at home with Doris. I don't mean cool in a good way. Their relationship's going to take some repairing, isn't it? But for Laura, I feel bad. She's shitting bricks at the prospect of continuing to be a CI, and I don't blame her. Harry's holding jail over her head as motivation. It's not great, is it? He knows she's got 2 boys. He's even got fairly close to one of them. Still, he's keeping her on a leash as his CI. We know this is a big case. There's a lot at stake, so the pressure's on to pursue whatever avenue they've got. I imagine he's torn about keeping her going, but he's not convincing me how much he cares about her well-being beyond just being an informant and helping them make a case. We see later in the episode she's made it. Got that connection to Estrada that Harry was hoping for. But she has to get naked when she talks to him. It's all very menacing when they turn up at her house and she has to drop her groceries on the step. Estrada must just be sussing her out. And it makes sense. He wants to check she's not wearing a wire. But did she really have to be naked? He was wearing swimming shorts. They could have provided her with a bathing suit, a bikini, or something for her dignity. Seemed like unnecessary degradation, but I suppose they're the ones with guns, so she'll do what she's told. Estrada mentions a shipment coming in, and he wants her to be there to learn more about the operation. She played it really cool, but it seemed foolish when she asked him if he'd be there. Totally unnecessary question that must have registered with him. I don't think he's any kind of fool. He tells Jimenez to keep an eye on her. I'd hazard a guess that she's got about a week to live. Back in Miami Metro, we see Dexter considering his options for a new place to dump his bodies. He talks to Batista, who knows that severed arm belonged to Handsome Tony, and if you remember, it was Angel who first told Dexter about this guy and what he did. Dexter does some cheeky manipulation, using Nicky Spencer to convince him to leave it alone. The guy's better off dead and he should spend his time elsewhere. When I first saw this scene, I thought Batista would tell him to keep his nose out, like, "Come on, Dexter, who's the detective here?" But he didn't, quite the opposite. Perhaps already Batista has a good level of respect for him. LaGuerta and Harry soon have a lead on their case. It took me by surprise. I don't know if anyone else found it a little bit jarring. I didn't think they had any clue who was killing the loners, but they had a bolo out for cars with stolen number plates. Perhaps this is a case of the writers allowing us to fill in the gap. But I, for one, didn't know they'd put out a request to hear of cars with stolen plates. Why would they think our killer used one? As I say, this was a bit jarring for me watching. They go to that house and speak to the people there, and I'm thinking, just how did we get here? I felt like I'd missed something, but on rewatch, I don't think I did. Anyway, the whole conversation with this dad and his daughter, it's really awkward. The guy was confrontational, maybe used to bad experiences with the police. I don't know. There was obvious distrust, but it felt uncomfortable to me, and they're no nearer knowing if this car is anything to do with the killings. Anyway, they later find who the car was originally registered to. And at the end of the episode, we see them planning a road trip to Tampa to visit him. Who wants to bet they find his dead body, and he's been dead a while? But just thinking about putting a bolo out on cars with false plates, there must be plenty of vehicles around such a huge city like Miami that fall into this category. I don't know. It would be so convenient, wouldn't it, if this car leads them to it actually ends up being the one that the killer used. Anyway, we move on. We join Dexter as he's doing some research into famous serial killers, looking at how they disposed of their victims. It's a really fun and creative scene. There's Ed Gein, the son of Sam killer. John Wayne Gacy skips in wearing a full clown costume, and he's played by Scott Reynolds. That must have ticked one off his bucket list, getting to play a serial killer. This was a really cool and original way to show the machinations in Dexter's head. I loved it. There's a scene with Masuka telling the story about what he believes happened with the arm and the alligator. There's a group of officers there. Dexter asks what would be a good way or a good place to dispose of a body. Masuka says if it's a hot girl, then taxidermy, which reminded me of Kurt Caldwell in New Blood, how he embalmed and displayed his victims. Maybe this was a deliberate reference to that. Harry comes in, and it's funny when he hears what they're talking about, and he gives Dexter a look like, what the fuck?
Dissecting Dexter.
Spatter matters.
Bobby and Angel come in, delivering Nikki's finger. This is so grim. I really don't like stuff with kids. I've said this before and I'll probably say it again. Of course, this sets in motion the reveal at the end of the episode. Dexter notices a spot of blood on the box, and it's the same blood type as Nikki. So when we also see the wound on Spencer's wrist, we're thinking the blood types are the same because the kidnappers are related. They didn't have DNA analysis back then, of course. I love Dexter making the blood slide, holding it up and looking at it closely. It's an image we've seen so many times before. It's so iconic. Spencer does a better job of faking it when they're talking about it this week. I thought his reaction previously didn't ring true for me when Nikki was first abducted, and now it makes sense why. I said at the time I felt he should have just completely lost it, been inconsolable. I know I would have been. Watching Spencer here, he's a bit hard to read, whether he's thinking, shit, they've got my blood, or has he compartmentalised? Or is there some split personality? Get my tongue round that. Split personality thing? Is there that kind of thing going on? The notion of a father doing this to his own son is so unthinkable to me that I just can't think why he could be doing this. He's already killed once, in no way accidentally, even displayed the body publicly, which is fucked up in itself. Why then target his own son? What's up with this? What's his play? What's his motive? I feel there's so much left to understand about him still. I hope they don't just say he's a psycho and leave it there. Was he beaten as a kid and it's made him want to punish kids himself? Who knows? But it's opened a big can of puzzlement in my head and confusion trying to work him out. Dexter shows genuine concern for Nikki, which I like. It shows a positive side of his personality and who he is. He thinks about him being locked away and alone, and it made me think about his own, at the moment, unreachable memories, those he has locked away, about his time in the shipping container. He does some good work noticing the hesitation cut, and he puts it all together when he notices Spencer's injury. First time I saw this, obviously they'd not revealed Spencer yet, but the hesitation cut, at that point I turned to my wife and I said, it is Spencer after all. She and I talked about some of the theories that had been floated around. He had more confidence killing the previous kid, or rather chopping the finger off the previous kid, but makes sense he might hesitate cutting his own son's finger off. I can't believe I'm saying those words. It's such an effed up thing. We get a scene with Deb and Harry. Deb all flippant in typical teenager fashion. She's been kicked off the team and there goes her chance at a scholarship. And more stress for Harry, who can't afford to send her otherwise. Deb and Dex have a nice brother-sister moment outside. Dexter giving her some sage advice for next time. Don't get caught. They seem to have moved past some of the tension from earlier in the series, and it's nice to see the foundation of the closer friendship we saw in the original series. I wonder how long it is before they share a steak and beer dinner together. The final bit of the episode, or the final few moments, we see Dexter putting it all together, and he clearly has intent on getting Spencer on his table. By the code, though, he needs to be sure, so there's probably still a lot more work to do. I suspect this will be one he doesn't tell Harry about. And I'm willing to bet that as far as Miami Metro is concerned, Spencer's just missing, never to be seen again. They can't find out, can they? Back when they were suspecting a cop was the Bay Harbor Butcher, no one ever said, "Oh shit, that's another one of our own." So he's got to just quietly go away, and no doubt Matthews will replace him. Dexter says he needs a new dumping ground very soon, so perhaps he'll be the first body to get dropped from a boat. I really think Camilla's boat will be the slice of life. That would be great. And when Jean dies, she'll just let Dexter have it. We didn't need to see Spencer shopping for those packed lunch trays. It confirms him as the child killer, but I think Dexter had said enough to give us what we needed. But wow, many people called it early on that Spencer was the abductor. I don't think we had evidence to go on at that point, but it turns out it was a good guess. He is. It certainly makes an impact on the season. I like that it's him, but you know me, the way I look at the reasons people are the way they are. I really want to learn more about his history and try to understand why he's doing it. This was a good episode again. I think it flowed better than last week for me, although I found LaGuerta's investigation jumped a little more than was shown to us. It didn't click with me. Maybe it was just me, and it just kept making me think I'd missed a connection somewhere. Okay, let's see what you think.
Listener feedback.
The email address to get in touch with me is dissectingdexter@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter @DissectDexter, Blue Sky as Dissecting Dexter, or Facebook.com/DissectingDexter. Andrew's emailed. She didn't like the eerie music played when we see young Brian Moser. She says, "We get it. He's the ice truck killer and has apparently been evil from the start." She's wanting more nuance. And she's right. I agree. We don't need the dark musical cues for Brian every time we see him. We know who he is. Andrea also agreed with me, wondering at Spencer's motivation, and felt the show overdid it when laying it out for us after Dexter put the pieces together. She also thinks that it's Brian killing the NHIs, but thinks it would have made more sense if it had been Spencer killing them. She says he was the one promoting the use of this term, NHIs, and in his position by upholding that standard could kill these people for as long as the practice wasn't being questioned. His motive? He enjoys killing. Has been doing it for years using different methods to avoid detection until now, and kills people who won't be investigated or missed. They could even give LaGuerta the win by her being the one who discovers it, and from there we see her first of many promotions. It would have been an interesting retcon, as it was suggested she used less scrupulous means to get to her position in the original series. I guess we'll be seeing Captain Matthews before too long, which makes sense since we know he had a good relationship with Harry, who has less than a year left in the timeline. Andrea goes on to say, "The Deb storyline made me sad. It's like she's closing the door to another, maybe better life she could have had. On the other hand, maybe she has no regrets about joining the force and enjoyed her time there even if it was cut short. I say this assuming she won't be going to university now, that Harry can't pay for it, and without her getting the scholarship. Did he use the entire college fund for Dexter's pre-med studies? Let's hope this isn't true and that Dexter was able to get a scholarship. The Laura Moses scene was an interesting watch. I like seeing her independence of Harry. She's such a cool customer. I guess we see how the boys will get to the shipping yard with her. Maybe they surprise her like they did in this episode and force her to bring the boys. I don't think we'll see her and Harry any further, and the next time he sees her is at the crime scene. With him apologising to Doris, I think they're setting it up so she'll be open to taking in Dexter. Thanks, Andrea. Good thoughts again there. It is sad for Deb. She's always been a hothead, and it gets her into trouble, this time costing her, as you say, perhaps a chance for a better life. We say better because being a cop ended up getting her killed ultimately. How different would things have been between her and Dexter if she'd taken this other path? And you raise an interesting question about how Dexter paid, or how they paid for Dexter to go to pre-med. Was that the college fund that would have otherwise gone to Deb? Interesting thought. I mean, we've seen evidence of Harry prioritising Dexter over Deb, so I would not be surprised. As for Laura, she will no doubt tell Harry about the shipment, where and when it is, but I think you're right. The cartel will turn up unannounced and she'll have to bring the kids along. Or maybe it'll happen in a different way. Laura tips off Harry, they bust the shipment, and Laura is then in the frame for being a snitch. The cartel would pick her up the next day with the kids and kill her then. Harry nowhere near to have a chance of helping her. Thanks, Andrea. Jennifer emailed, also feeling bad for Deb, assuming her next step will be heading to Police Academy. She thought it was a solid episode and is hoping for a season 2. Here's Travis.
Big week for all you Spencer heads out there. You were right. He is the guy who was behind the kidnappings and the murder and potential murder of his own son. If it really even is his own son coming up, I suspect Dexter will get to him in time to save the boy. It's a fun little twist, and I think we're all kind of expecting it to go in a certain way that the department's not going to find out about it. Dexter's going to kill him and sweep it under the rug, presumably, because you would think something like this would have gotten brought up in the past or the future, depending on your point of view, when the whole Bay Harbor Butcher stuff is going down. Is this going to end up being the kind of thing where Spencer was always just secretly a vindictive asshole and he's got some grand plan to stick it to his wife or get back with her or something like that? Or is this going to be some kind of split personality thing? He doesn't even quite know what he's doing, and, I don't know. I can see it going either way. My prediction is that it'll kind of end the way the Skinner ended. Maybe Dexter will kill him in such a way, or things will work out in such a way that Spencer's body gets found and he doesn't take the heat for it. It's like, oh, look, the cartel got him or something. And of course, like many other people will predict as well, this will be the way that Captain Matthews comes in, presumably as Detective Matthews or Lieutenant Matthews, Sergeant Matthews, whatever the friggin' hierarchy is over at Miami Metro right now, because it's all wacky. I think other people should comment on how kind of wobbly the Spencer reveal was. Like, we kind of figured it out. Dexter figured it out. We saw the wrist, and we remembered things he was saying that was fishy. But then, man, they're flashing back to shit we heard 22 seconds ago. Like it's the usual suspects, Kobayashi mug drop, and then the big second reveal at the end where he's buying the Lunchables at the store, in case anybody wasn't paying attention. They had the music. Whoa, do my kids love these things? Like, what the fuck? We got it. Kind of bizarre coming from this show. I want to point out briefly how much more tolerable high school drama is in this show than it was in New Blood. That has everything to do with the fact that I love Deb and I hate Harrison. I could watch Deb have stupid high school drama with popularity and trying to fit in and be the captain. I could watch that all day, so long as I don't gotta watch Harrison be sad. I couldn't help but notice that Deb punches a teammate in the nose and gets kicked off the team and suspended, while talking back to New Blood, Harrison broke an opponent's arm after he'd already submitted in a wrestling match, and that kid got He just had to forfeit that one match. He didn't even get kicked out of school or have to move or anything. And the fact he had sex later that night anyway. It's like this guy got rewarded for that behavior. Speaking of Deb in high school, I feel vindicated. Her horny friend, she's bugging now more than ever, and I never liked her. I never liked her, and now she's wilding out, and everyone's seeing she's a bad egg. Deb's got to kick her to the curb, girl. She's getting Deb in trouble and acting all kinds of fool, making Dexter embarrassed. Last thing I want to say is those kids are still huge in the 70s, man. I can't get over it. Every time they flash back to young Dexter and Brian, I'm like, oh, man, these kids are huge. What are they putting in that milk, Gareth? I gotta know. And I also can't help but notice everyone in the 70s, or at least Harry and Dexter's mom, Laura, they always look like they just got back from the optometrist or something. Their eyes are so dilated. Is that just my TV or something, right? They look like they've got vampire eyes. They're like the shark's eyes in Jaws, just these huge black lifeless things, It's bizarre. Anyway, I don't have a whole lot to say this week. I think this is a fairly short one, for me at least. I don't know if Miami Metro would have been first on the scene at a John Doe alligator eating many, many miles outside the city limits, but we'll roll with it. What I want to know next week, what I'm dying to know, is what wacky code did Masuka, city official and mandated reporter, send to that underage girl on her pager? Inquiring minds want to know.
Thanks, Travis. I wondered that too, and maybe we'll never know. It prompted a go-to-hell reply, though. It can't have been pretty. Yeah, you'd expect Dexter to follow Spencer now and be able to save Nikki. They've got some explaining to do about Spencer to account for this. The second reveal of Spencer in the store was completely unnecessary, but you're right. It's like they thought they should press the point in case not everyone was paying attention. Your thoughts about the high school drama echo mine. I mean, I can't say I hate Harrison, but the stuff with Sophia didn't annoy me. We always wondered if we'd get some teen angst in this show, given Deb's age, and we've certainly got a bit of that. But it's been tolerable. I guess you were never a fan of Sophia, and I liked Dexter's complete non-reaction to the go-to-hell message he got from her. I mean, from her point of view, she legitimately feels like he's messed her around, which I sympathise with. But for Dexter, he was never into her, and he's got more important things to worry about, like a child killer. So I see his point of view too. Thanks, Travis. Here's Chris now.
Unfortunately, this week, my thoughts and feedback are going to skew on the negative side, so apologies to folks in advance. My main issues this week were, first of all, Dexter dumping Levi Reed's body in broad daylight with no gloves on. I realise that Dexter's in his youth and he's going to make mistakes and stuff. I just thought that was a little bit much. He could have been very easily saw doing that, and I felt as if it took me out of the show just a little bit. Just a minor gripe, not a major one. The main issue that I had with this week's episode are sort of twofold. More focused on the scene with the real serial killers, the John Wayne Gacy, Ed Gein, etc. And I know a lot of people did find that fun, and it was great seeing Scott Reynolds having a bit of fun in his cameo role, and I can understand why people like this. But for me, I, like many others, love the Dexter character. I root for him, even though deep down we know we shouldn't. In a sense, I think we even want to be Dexter at times. I think if everyone was honest with themselves, at some point in their life, they've probably envisioned themselves taking out a bad guy or doing something like that, and that's part of the fun of being a Dexter fan. These three killers are real-life serial killers that have done really horrible, real-life things. It's not a fictional character. And for Dexter to refer to them as the greats and almost look up to them, it's an element of the character that I don't really like, and it's the second time this season we've really touched on that after the scrapbook that we saw, I believe, in episode 1, and for me, I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. but I realise that might just be a personal thing. The other part I didn't like, and I won't get into it too much because I want to see it play out before I really comment too much on it, is the Spencer reveal. I can't see how he would kill a child the way the judge's child was killed. I really can't see it. We'll all see that play over the next few episodes, and I'll comment on that a bit later, but so far that's a no from me. Did have a few thoughts I wanted to just share and get your opinion and maybe other people's opinions that listen to Dissecting Dexter. Is it possible that Harry does briefly take Brian in? If we do get a season 2, could we possibly see that Brian and Dexter are taken in by Harry and Doris, and it's just too much for them and they can't cope with a newborn and Dexter at the same time, and Brian gets sent back into the care system? Might not happen, but it could. There is an element of rewriting the show's history, and we just don't know. So that could be potentially interesting in a season 2 if we get there. The rookie cop Clark, I do think he could be a potential victim of the killer, and I do believe at this point the killer is going to turn out to be Brian Moser. I hope not. I like the character of Clark, and I think there's potential there for some interesting storylines, but I do think he could be the potential victim. I know we were speculating about Sophia, but I don't think that's going to happen. Other thing I wanted to just bring up, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and everybody else that listens to the show's thoughts. Michael C. Hall's voiceovers at the moment definitely are doing two different things. They're telling the story of Dexter's life. Now, whether that's telling the story to someone, potentially in Dexter Resurrection, or whether it's just for the benefit of the show, we don't know at the moment. I hope that he is actually telling the story to someone in the sequel series and it ties the two together. The other thing that's going on is Dexter's inner monologue is by Michael C. Hall in the moment when Patrick Gibson is doing things, and I think that's potentially confusing for some viewers. I know it has been for some of the people that I speak to about the show, and I wondered if we do get a season 2, and I hope we do because I do love the show, would it be possible that because we've now accepted Patrick Gibson in the role of Dexter, that Patrick Gibson actually provides his own inner monologue and the show can stand on its own 2 feet without Michael C. Hall? And if we do accept that he's telling the story to someone and that continues, could we have the sort of dual thing? Just thought that was quite interesting to think about. I do love Michael C. Hall's voiceovers, so it's not a huge issue for me, but it's potentially something to think about. Always looking forward to hearing everyone else's thoughts, including yours, Gareth, and apologies for sounding so negative this week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks ever so much, Chris. You raise a really valid point about how the show, or how Dexter himself, treated real-life monsters, real serial killers. He's looking up to them as heroes. We saw earlier in the season his scrapbook hidden in the porn. He's had a long-term interest in people like this. They are like his pop stars, his favourite Hollywood stars, his idols to admire and respect and now possibly emulate. Although the scene is played for laughs, it's light-hearted in tone. And as you've heard, I got a kick out of it too. It's a stark and harsh reminder of the dark side of this young Dexter. We all root for him, don't we? We do, even though we see him doing bad things. It's a point we've talked about many times on the podcast. We rationalise it and we go with it because he's charming and only kills bad guys. I had a lively discussion with someone in YouTube comments recently, not on my channel, elsewhere, but we were divided on the two sides of the argument. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I just feel that some people just can't accept that he's a bad guy, and New Blood really hammered this point home. And this person I was interacting with thought it was okay that he kills because he's helping Miami. He's doing it to help Miami, and they couldn't accept that he's killing purely for selfish reasons, and any positive impact on society is just a positive byproduct. Without the code and the guidance, tutelage, call it nurture from Harry, Dexter would be more like Brian, arguably. The Dexter we see here is not the Dexter from New Blood, or even the Dexter from the original series. That older Dexter is way, way further along the road as a murderer. But it's this ongoing challenge we have as viewers, testing our love, our allegiance for this character. And this scene you're talking about, it shows how flippant Dexter is about these historic killers, admiring them to the extent that he turns to them for advice about body disposal. The fact, Chris, that you were uncomfortable about this, and it's a legitimate response, it shows, the way I see it, it shows the scene worked and made you, and no doubt many others, think about who this person really is behind the boyish smile and the affable demeanour. Your question about Brian, and does Harry actually take in Dexter too? We will see, of course, you said that yourself. But if I have to give an answer, I'd say I don't think so. We've seen Harry already knows a bit about the two boys, and I think this was set up to account for why he only takes Dexter and leaves Brian. It's really harsh and hard on the other boy, but maybe Harry trusted the system naively and trusted that it would take care of him. The point about the voiceover, I kind of feel they have to stick with Michael's voiceover now they've started. It remains to be seen whether he's telling his story to someone else. It's set out like he was looking back on his own life as it flashed before his eyes in the emergency room. Maybe they'll end up reconsidering that if the show gets a second season and becomes more of a straightforward prequel show, unbookended or unconnected with anything in the present. Thanks, Chris. Always good to hear your thoughts. And I'm sorry about the mix-up last week. Chris did email in a voicemail for the last episode, but it looks like it got lost in the ether. Not his fault, not my fault. Let's blame the internet and the gods of the zeros and ones. But I'm sorry that you spent time recording and it got missed. Mamoon emailed in again, feeling very pleased with himself that he called it. And the child killer is indeed someone from Miami Metro. He's glad they went this route, and he's holding out hope that we get to see young Dokes at some point, and also predicts that Spencer will be the first body Dexter dumps in the ocean. Thanks, Mamoon. I think so too.
Hey Gareth, Nick here. Well, it's hard to believe that we only have 3 episodes left, and on top of that, Resurrection is already filming. Man, what a time to be alive. It's insane. Anyways, Episode 7, The Big Bad Body Problem. I think this was overall a really good episode, but I also want to acknowledge that it had maybe a few too many moving parts crammed into one of the shorter runtimes of the season. I was just a tad disappointed by how quickly he was able to overcome that cliffhanger from Episode 6, but, it was a really fun scene with some excellent narration from Michael C. Hall, so, it's kind of hard to hold it against it. It also led to some really funny scenarios that had me cracking up. His little dumpster diving adventure was amazing. Harry trying to keep his distance because of how bad he smelled. The condom misunderstanding. Man, I loved all these moments, so it's hard to hold much against them here. In fact, I think this was kind of a common theme throughout this episode. Anytime I felt a tinge of disappointment, I was immediately met with some other aspect that I think it did really well. Case in point, a highlight of the episode for me was actually Dexter's quick conversation with Officer Sanders. I feel like this character exists mainly to shine a light on Dexter's suppressed humanity. Sanders asks him to keep his secret from his colleagues, and Dexter immediately and without hesitation responds with acceptance and understanding. Partially because he's also living a secret life, but also because he doesn't subscribe or even understand the same prejudices that many humans do. It's a response that I fear is not as common as it should be even today, so I just love this moment. That contradiction really speaks to why I think this character is endlessly intriguing. I also like that they continue to try new things with this season. I think the moment where he was imagining Ed Gein, David Berkowitz, and John Wayne Gacy was a lot of fun. Also, playing Gacy is a huge step up from Scott Reynolds' last cameo in Season 7. But again, I feel like they moved on from it a little too fast. Even big, important moments felt a little cheated because of the pacing in this episode. One of the last shots in the episode is this big dramatic moment where Dexter holds up a blood slide, and you hear that, really intense, dramatic, iconic music, but they cut away way too fast. I think it just needed a couple more seconds to breathe, so I'm not really sure why they did that. Of course, the scene with Laura and Estrada at the mansion was incredible, and more than a little unsettling. I'm excited, but also kind of dreading the shipping container scene, but it's coming, guys. Buckle up. But anyways, let's talk about that big bad. I just want to say I think they really handled the Cloak and Dagger stuff pretty well this season. I've been suspicious of Aaron Spencer since the day they cast Patrick Dempsey, just because of the casting. But they still managed to have me doubting myself and guessing all the way up until this reveal. And it sent me for a loop, man. I was so excited when this was finally confirmed. So if you'll indulge my theorizing a bit, I am now like 90% convinced of a few things. And again, I don't know any of these as facts, so this is just pure theory, but hear me out. One, I think Nicky is not Aaron Spencer's son. I think he's a son born from his wife's 14-year affair, which I think would probably go a long way in explaining why he's willing to kidnap, torture, and maybe even kill his quote-unquote son. Two, I think his motivation for killing the judge's son is either to keep the police laser focused on the cartels, or maybe the judge oversaw his divorce proceedings and in his eyes ruined his family. So I think one way or the other, I think at the end of the day, this is going to be a very personal motivation for him. And three, I think Tanya, who the big conversation right now seems to be like, what are they doing with Sarah Michelle Gellar? What is the point? Because, she's a big name and this character isn't really doing much. And I think that's going to change soon. I think Tanya is going to figure out what's going on, kind of like Dexter did, and Spencer's going to kill her for it. And that's just another thing that's going to earn him a spot on Dexter's table. So I could honestly go on because I've been thinking about this like nonstop since this episode aired. And I think, honestly, if you ask me, I think I have a pretty good feel for the rest of the season, just kind of based on my theories and whatnot. But I'm still super excited to see how it all plays out, because I'm sure there are some surprises coming that I haven't even considered yet. Anyways, I can't wait for the next 3 episodes, and I can't wait to hear what everyone else thinks. So here's hoping for a Season 2 renewal soon, man. I'm having so much fun with this season. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next episode. Cheers, Gareth.
I love your point about the interaction with Clark. It showed Dexter being so accepting of people's individuality, their right to have secrets, and how he was so non-judgmental. We know Dexter has no real interest in romance or sex at this point. I mean, the blowjob from Sophia was a nice bonus that he enjoyed at the time, but he doesn't seem interested or bothered about a repeat performance, as we've seen with his apathy this week. The thing with Clark shows a positive side of Dexter's humanity, and it's something we can get behind, something we can root for and cling on to when we're talking about all the darkness. And, we've just talked about that in response to Chris's voicemail. We've talked about him being this detached killer at his core, but this is a nice reminder that his unique personality has positive aspects too. Describing him as endlessly intriguing is a lovely way to put it. Let's talk about Spencer. That is a fantastic point about Nicky maybe not being Spencer's actual son. I'd not considered that. The blood types matching may not represent a direct familial relationship there. It might just be coincidental that they're the same blood type. We didn't see them interact a great deal, if at all, so we don't know how close they actually are. I wonder if Spencer ever suspected that maybe Nicky wasn't his real son, and I don't know. Could he have always had his suspicions? If Nicky is the result of an affair, it would make sense why Spencer would resent or even hate him. I wonder if we'll find out that Jimmy Powell wasn't really Judge Powell's son, and his wife had an affair. Perhaps Spencer himself is the result of his own mother having an affair, and this is where perhaps his damage comes from. So much still to find out, but this would help me get my head around things. And that's another good theory, that perhaps Judge Powell's son was killed as cover to get them to lead them down that cartel route, so that when his own son was went missing and was ultimately killed, that they'd think that was another cartel killing, and that no one would ever suspect Spencer himself from being the murderer. Good prediction about Tanya Martin. Sarah Michelle isn't here just to make up the numbers. Something has to be coming up for her, and your theory would be a big deal. Could she suss things out like Dexter did? She didn't get to where she is without having a good analytical brain in her head. Thanks very much, Nick. Some brilliant theories there, and it's given me lots to think about. I love this about going through the listener feedback. I hear from you guys that listening to this podcast as a companion to the show, it can help you mull over your own thoughts about the show and help develop perhaps your own theories. But it works both ways. I think I've said this before, it's a two-way street, is that your ideas and suggestions and theories can help my own thoughts about the show and lead me down new avenues of thought that I hadn't previously considered. I don't pretend to be the ultimate source of information on this show, or the the oracle of any description, but hey, I'm just a fan like you guys are. Well, whether these theories pan out or not, I think we're in for some fun over these final few episodes. We, as Nick reminded us, we've got the devastating shipping container scene in store, but so much more going on. I'm still loving this, and I'm loving how we've got so many good ideas about the show and different opinions and theories. Plenty to talk about, and I hope you'll join me again next week when we'll dissect some more Dexter together. Until then, thank you, dear friends, for listening. Thank you to everyone who sent in feedback, and special thanks to all my wonderful Patreon supporters. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.